When was the last time you saw a villain who was just evil? And I don't mean misunderstood, I don't mean broken by society, and I definitely don't mean secretly trying to save the world in a twisted way. I mean someone who wakes up in the morning, looks in the mirror, and decides to make everyone else's day absolute hell just because they think it's fun. If you grew up watching anime in the 90s or early 2000s, this was the standard. We had villains like Frieza, Cell, or even the early Disney Renaissance villains like Scar or Jafar. They were bad. We hated them. And we loved hating them. But look at the landscape today. Turn on My Hero Academia, Demon Slayer, or even look at the MCU. The monster has been replaced by the tragedy. Nowadays, the villain isn't just an obstacle for the hero to punch, they are a thesis statement on trauma. They are victims first and villains second. Has the tragic backstory become a cheap checklist item that writers feel forced to include? Let's get into it. Let's start with the then. Let's talk about Frieza. To this day, Frieza is widely considered one of the greatest anime villains of all time, but if you actually look at his character sheet, it's remarkably empty. What is Frieza's trauma? Does he have a sad backstory about his father not loving him? Was he bullied in galactic preschool? No, Frieza is a space real estate agent who commits genocide for profit and ego. He's polite, articulate, and completely irredeemable. The function of a villain like Frieza is not to make the audience ask questions. His function is to be a force of nature. Because he has no morality and no sob story, there's no reasoning with him. You cannot talk no jutsu Frieza. You cannot appeal to his humanity because he discarded it long ago. This creates a very specific type of narrative tension. When Goku faces Frieza on Namek, the audience knows there's only one resolution. One of them has to die. The stakes are absolute. Think of Frieza less like a human and more like a hurricane. You don't empathize with a hurricane, you just try to survive it. This purity allows the hero to shine brighter. Goku's transition into the Super Saiyan wasn't triggered by a philosophical debate, it was triggered by pure, unadulterated rage against injustice. If Frieza had paused the fight to give a 10-minute monologue about how he was oppressed as a child, that legendary Super Saiyan moment would have lost its punch. We needed to hate him so that we could cheer for his downfall. Sometimes simplicity is power. Now let's flip the coin. If Frieza is the then, Tamura Shigaraki is the definitive now. On the surface, Shigaraki is terrifying, but Horikoshi doesn't let us just see a monster. He forces us to watch the origin of that monster. We see Tenko Shimura, an innocent kid who just wanted to be a hero, destroyed by his own uncontrollable power, and then groomed by the ultimate manipulator, all for one. This is where the tragic backstory is used correctly. Shigaraki's tragedy isn't just there to make us feel bad, it is the central conflict of the series. My Hero Academia is a story about a society that has become complacent. The heroes focus on fighting villains, but they ignore the cracks in society that create those villains. Shigaraki represents the failure of that society. When Deku looks at Shigaraki, he doesn't just see a bad guy to punch, he sees a crying child who needs saving. This changes the win condition entirely. For Goku, winning meant killing Frieza. For Deku, winning means saving Shigaraki's heart while stopping his rampage. That is a much more complex, nuanced, and difficult heavy lift for a writer. Shigaraki works because his pain is the weapon he uses against the heroes. He forces the audience to ask, are we responsible for the monsters we create? In this specific instance, the sympathetic villain is superior because the story demands nuance. However, and this is a big however, just because it worked for Shigaraki doesn't mean it works for everyone. And this is where we run into the sympathy saturation problem. We have reached a point in media where writers seem terrified of writing a character who is just a jerk. It feels like there's a mandatory checklist now. First, give them a cool design. Second, give them an overpowered ability. And third, wait, before they die, insert a 15-minute flashback about their sick sister, their dead puppy, or their lonely childhood. Take Demon Slayer, for example. I love the show, the animation is incredible, but let's be honest, almost every single demon gets a post-decapitation flashback. For main antagonists like Akaza or Gutaro, it's heartbreaking and adds incredible depth, but when it happens to every single enemy, it starts to lose its impact. It becomes formulaic. The audience stops feeling, oh no, how tragic, and starts thinking, okay, wrap it up, let's get to the next fight. The problem isn't the backstory itself, it's the pacing and the intent. When you try to make everyone sympathetic, you end up making no one scary. If I know that the villain is just going to cry and repent in the last 5 minutes of the episode, I stop fearing them. I stop wondering if the hero will win, and I start wondering how the hero will provide therapy. It softens the edges of the conflict. Sometimes you don't want to understand the killer. Sometimes you just want to see them stopped. When sympathy becomes the default trait, it stops being a character trait and starts feeling like a get-out-of-jail-free card for bad behavior. Interestingly, we are starting to see a reaction against this trend. Look at the man in Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. He was a villain with zero sympathetic qualities. He was funny, cruel, and irredeemable, and audiences loved him. Why? Because it was refreshing. It was a palate cleanser after a decade of sad, moping villains. It reminded us that sometimes it's fun to watch a bad guy just be bad. So, who is better, the then or the now? The answer is that we need both. We need Shigaraki to challenge our morals. We need villains like Pain from Naruto or Magneto from X-Men to make us question if the heroes are actually right. These characters drive the plot forward intellectually. They make the story about more than just punching. But we also need the Friezas, we need the Dios, we need the Sukunas. We need the characters who serve as a chaotic measuring stick for the hero's strength and resolve. Characters who force the hero to push past their limits, not because of a debate, but because of survival. The issue today isn't that villains are too sympathetic, it's that writers are treating sympathy as a default setting, rather than a deliberate choice. A tragic backstory is a spice. If you put it in every dish, everything tastes the same. To wrap this up, the shift from Frieza to Shigaraki represents anime growing up. We moved from black and white morality plays to shades of gray. That is a good thing. Shigaraki is one of the best written antagonists of the modern generation because his tragedy matters to the plot. But let's not forget the value of a villain you just love to hate. We don't need to hug every bad guy. Sometimes they just need to be blasted into space. I want to know where you stand on this. Do you prefer the complex, broken villains like Shigaraki and Eren Yeager, or do you miss the pure evil energy of Frieza and Dio? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this deep dive, do me a favor and smash that like button, it helps the algorithm more than you know, and subscribe for more video essays on the philosophy of anime. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.